Francisco Trindade, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Mateo. Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Francisco, we're going to be talking today about engineering managers and strategy for engineering managers and how to get the best of your development team. But I want to start talking about you and what you do. So what is your role today and what do you do?
So I was just like, thanks for the question. I was just laughing because just yesterday, one of the meetings, we had this question about like, how do you explain your role to your grandma? So I thought it was kind of similar. But so yeah, my name is Francisco, and I'm an engineering director here at Braze in New York, it's a company based in New York, but in the US. In practice, what I do is like I manage like a division. So I manage actually two divisions, which are like a collection of teams that are like software engineering teams in different kind of like different areas of the company. The main goal, I think, from my perspective, is really, I'm sure we're gonna talk about that in the conversations. In the goal, the way we think about engineering like leaders, and including my position in the company, is kind of like this twofold aspect. One is like you want to make sure that your organization or your teams are highly productive. They're delivering the product that the customers are looking for effectively, and kind of course like the business goals of the company. On the other hand, you're also making sure that the team is like, we call it like mature. It's kind of like maturing as like a term, just like, so the people are growing in the team, they are fulfilled with their role, the way the team is working is kind of becoming better with time, so things are kind of improving. So like that's kind of how, like the two I guess like two aspects of my role from a very high level perspective.
Very nice. And it sounds simple as we say it out loud that way, right? But so much goes into it, right? Making sure your team is productive, and making sure you have a mature team, both from a fulfillment standpoint, a growth standpoint. There's so much packed into those goals, right? So important goals. Let's go back a little bit. How did you start working in technology?
It was it's interesting. It actually was somewhat by accident. I think I mean, technology in general was something I chose. I think I was, thinking about what to study, and I always like maths and kind of like just like the logical thinking, and I ended up studying computer engineering, which is like pretty much hardware. So like I guess like my formation is about like designing hardware, and like I didn't really, I mean, I learned a lot, and it was like very like constructive from like a kind of like just like having capacity to like think and understand concepts way. But like I didn't really like the field. It was kind of very, like a bit too formal, too structured at the time, at least like the experience I got. So, and then I was kind of like a bit trying to reimagine my career. I then decided to start a company with a friend of mine, two friends of mine, and we thought about what we wanted to do, and of course, and we had at the time like no funding or no like kind of like we didn't have like resources to actually build something in many areas, and we kind of decided or figure out that the only thing we kind of knew how to do and we could actually sell was like software, because I had learned a bit of software like as part of this computer engineering course. So like I learned assembly and C++ and kind of like low level software, and like a friend of mine had like also some knowledge of software, and we're kind of like, oh, we can sell this, like, and that was it. And then like I started by accident kind of like started this company, or like I got into this industry, started this company. And during that period was when I started understanding more about software development and reading, and then like liking it, and kind of and that kind of how I got into like software development as a profession.
And that was in Brazil?
That was in Brazil, yes.
What city, Brazil?
in Porto Alegre.
Porto
So,
Alegre. Very nice, and very
and then
close to Uruguay. And
yes,
you were fresh out of college when you started the
I
company.
was
You were still a
still in
student.
college. Yes, yeah, I was still a student. I was doing my master's at the time, and then the I guess like the interesting opportunity that happened. Like the company didn't. I mean, I kind of learned how to build software, and like at the time it was like the beginning of like this was 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. No, 20 years ago. Was the beginning of like Agile and TDD and extreme programming. That was the concepts that were like appearing in the industry. So I was reading a lot about that from the beginning. Like it was just like there was like the initial kind of books and all that was happening. So I kind of like self-taught like software development and then practice of how to run teams based on like reading these interesting books that were showing up. Like I think so the timing was really interesting. There's a story about how I got there as well, and then what happens, like the company we eventually closed the company. We couldn't like we did everything wrong with that company. Apart from the software was good, everything else was just like we just made one mistake after the other. And but then I had read all these books. From a lot of books that I was reading were from this company called Thoughtworks, which was kind of like one of the big companies that was investing a lot in like Agile like at the time. So I thought, well, maybe I should try to work for them, like if that's like now that so I can get more information and more like more kind of like knowledge, and that ended up happening. I ended up like getting hired by Thoughtworks in the UK, and then I moved to the UK, and that kind of like was the initial part of like my kind of abroad, I guess, like moving away from Brazil and
So you moved out
working
from
abroad.
Brazil to the UK, and how old
Yeah,
were you when that happened?
I was 25,
25. To
24,
London?
25. Yeah,
You moved to
in London.
London?
Yes.
How was that experience? Please let us know how it felt going from Porto Alegre is not a small city, right? It's not a small city by any definition, but London
Yes,
is huge, right?
definitely not London. Yeah, I mean, it was, looking back, I think it was very interesting. It was also challenging. I think looking back, like I had never been in London, but I kind of like was just like I might as well just do it, and I come back if I don't like it. That was kind of like my approach. Um, then it was interesting because I was moving from the main challenge I think was I was entering as a graduate at Thoughtworks, so we did some training, and so like the work part was kind of like was interesting. And because I was a graduate, I was also like probably, and I had my company already, so I was probably one of the most experienced graduates that we had at intake. So that work part was not like the development part was like not, I was learning, but it was like it was not like the main challenge. The main challenge was really the language, because I realized
Right.
then, which just sounds silly now, that like the British English is much different from what I had learned, which was American English. So and also I had never lived in a place that was kind of like English was the main spoken language, and I was consulting, like Thoughtworks the consultancy, so I was going to clients just like trying to like like you had to like talk to kind of just like that's part of the job. And so there was a lot of just like kind of like rolling with the punches, not really knowing what's going on, and just like hoping that things are gonna go be fine. And but also I think Thoughtworks at the time, and still I think is, although I left a long time ago, but there was like amazing people, like really supportive environment. So it was kind of like a really great learning environment for me. I think like as like my first job, my first like official job, and being a consultancy also, like I worked across like many companies, like small, big teams, and learning from people that are like now kind of really kind of like that have developed concepts that we like, like continues. Like I was Jazz Humble was like a part of the office in London, and like I was just, so he was starting to talk about continuous delivery, and like which is, so like I was there like listening to those conversations, like Sam Newman, which kind of like talking about microservices. He was like, I work with him in projects, and so there was a lot of like really interesting people that to learn from. Like I was kind of like really kind of like if there was like that saying, they have to be the least knowledgeable person in the room. I had definitely kind of like
You were
achieved
that.
that. Like I was that.
Very intense learning. I love it. At that time, did you think you were going to end up leading teams in the future? Was that in your mind, or were you just surviving and learning like crazy?
I mean, not wasn't in my mind at the beginning. I mean, like I was coming, like just going back, I was like, I had my company that was like kind of like I made that job out of nothing, and then I went to this kind of not really knowing what that role was, right? I was like, what does a software developer actually do, like, or a consultant, like? So it was a bit like open to anything and kind of see how kind of like what would happen. With time, I kind of like as working in that environment, I think like what I started noticing is that I wasn't gonna be the best technical person in the group. Like it was just like there were people that were just like incredible. That like, when I learned, like when I kind of started realizing the amount of intention and kind of effort and attention they would put into technical topics, I was just like, wow, I just like don't want to do that. Like just like that's not something I like doing, right? Like there's people like developing their own like programming languages, and I'm just like, well, that's like I never thought about that as something I want to do like in my side as like like in my spare time. So but I also noticed that like my strength was just like making teams, the kind of like the being like the boundary between like the business and like the technology, being still like I was still working as a software developer engineer, so like writing code and I think still kind of being part of that, but I kind of always, I think, ended up being like kind of like in the boundary of like, okay, talking to the client or like aligning how the team works and just like making sure that things were like working well. And I started noticing this is kind of where like the sweet spot is, right? Is being someone that is technical, but is also kind of like aware and intentional about like what the business is trying to achieve and like what we're trying to build.
Right.
And that was like, I mean, engineering leadership didn't exist really in that at the time, right? We didn't have like engineering managers in the like we just had like engineers in the team. So like it was kind of like a bit as like informal roles that we would take.
Okay.
So that's kind of how it happened. So, but I still then I never. So I always thought like, I'm gonna probably work in technology, but like I'm probably gonna work with people that are more experienced technically than me, and like that maybe that's what my main focus, and that's kind of how I started like shaping a thing like my
You you
my
you were
career.
you were more of an orchestrator, more of an organizer, a communicator, someone that knew how to look at all the pieces and putting them together and organize the puzzle, right? And that started shaping itself from the moment you were a consultant and kind of you realized I don't want to be an individual contributor in the sense of being an expert in XYZ language. I'm not that passionate about it, but I'm still passionate about the bigger picture of how pieces fall together, right? And so
Yeah.
and then you started slowly leading teams, and were those some of the most important skills that help you get to more leadership roles? How did that happen, and what were the most important skills that got you there?
Yeah. So I think like one interesting aspect of that was that as consultants, like I think, and I spent like I think 7-8 years at Thoughtworks, maybe, yeah. So like it was a good amount of time like doing that job. And as consultants, a lot like the emphasis of the company, a lot of it was like high quality technology. So a lot of it was just like building high quality code and test-driven development and kind of bringing those practices to teams. But also was about like how teams work, right? So a lot of what we did was just going to companies and say, well, you should define your project a bit differently. You should think about how you write your requirements. You should think about like how the whole flow from like idea to production happens. And we were like trying to influence people or teams, clients to do that. And that's how we achieved like the impact as a consultancy. So it wasn't like just writing code, right? So I think I learned those skills. I started seeing that like there's a lot of the success of software that is not just technology, right? There's other parts of it that kind of like impact impact like a team. And I had this quote that I would tell people that I still tell people, saying that I've never seen a project fail because the engineers were like not skilled enough. Like I never been in a place that will say, well, we just needed better engineers, right? That's what's missing. I've been in many situations where we say, well, we built the wrong thing, or like it was clearly this would take a year and we thought we tried to do it in 2 months. Like or like we defined the requirements wrong, or like we're not talking to each other. So like Thoughtworks had this idea of like the watermelon project that we kind of is usually what we ended up in was kind of this watermelon projects where like green on the outside and red on the inside. Like everyone thinks is when you're talking about, everyone's like, oh, this is going great. And then, but everyone in the team knows that this is not going great, but we're not talking about it. Or like, so I think so I started learning that as a kind of like as a skill. And then I still wasn't thinking about being like an engineering leader, but then I started another company. I left Thoughtworks to start another company. I was like interested in startups, and then that kind of like I fell in that position again because it was like I need to build a team, and I kind of like started running my own team. So that was my first kind of like, I guess, like actual leadership position, that I was leading a team, but it was still based on my rules. Right? Nobody was telling me, like in way, like just like I was making it up somehow. And then recently, I think 5 years ago, I kind of moved to the US, and that was really when I joined a company to be formally a senior manager at the time and a director. And that was like the first time I kind of like had a formal like engineering leadership position. And like I think there was some aspects of that I had to learn, but I think kind of a lot of the experience that I had from all these different kind of like things that I've had done, like applied really well.
Very nice. So you had 2 startups, a lot of consulting in the middle, and 5 years ago you moved to the US and you started working formally in a near leadership position. And I love what you said about projects not failing because of the quality of the engineers, but more so because of the scope creep or communication issues or estimating issues. And I see that a lot. I agree with you. I see that a lot. I didn't know the watermelon project's analogy. I love it. I'm going to steal it and use it. And I wanna go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say like, and this is just to clarify, I think just for people listening, like this is not to say in detriment that like there isn't skill in engineering, right? I think like there's definitely variation in skill, and there's like people that are like incredible, and like but the fact is that you can adapt what you're doing to the people that you have, and that's like I think that's part of the role of a leader, right? It's just like you have a team, right? Like so then if you don't have the skills that you need to do X, then maybe don't do X, right? Like do something else, focus on some other area, and use that to kind of like to achieve your goal. Like I think so yes, there's definitely skill in engineering, and there's definitely variation in that skill, and like different folk. Like it's not like you can replace engineers, and we're not trying to minimize that, but there's a lot around it that also like matters.
Yeah. I love your posts on LinkedIn, and you give a lot of thought on what it means to be an engineering manager and how to go about it, right? And sort of kind of reality theory, but also reality and how to go about managing teams, right? So I would love the audience to hear from you. What do you value the most in an engineering manager, right? What do you think is most important in their role?
Yeah, so interesting. That's definitely it's an interesting question. There are many things that I'll take the bait and talk about what's the most important thing. Like in my opinion, I think like the way I talk about engineering manager and I think about engineering manager is like kind of centered around systems thinking, right? So it's just like thinking about the system and not the kind of individual. Like so think about the whole and other parts. So you have a team as a leader, your team you have a team because the team exists to achieve something, right? And the something usually is building a product, building a solution, a technology solution. I guess that's a software solution. So that's your goal. And then what you have to do as a leader, like an engineering leader, is optimize how engineering works to achieve that goal. And that like will have different levels of it, right? So it'll be like, maybe there's technology improvements to make. Maybe there's like, you need to focus on refactoring a part of your product. Maybe you have to improve how testing is done. Maybe you have to hire new people. Like there's different, maybe the way the team works is kind of like could be improved. So there's a lot, there's like thousands of options of what you can do, but like you have to think about the goal and that you can use that to kind of drive forward. So really I think like when I think about being an engineering leader, I think there's a lot to it and a lot like you can, in all these situations I describe, options I described, I guess, possibilities I described, there's like techniques and skills and things that you need to know to kind of take action on that. I do think the main skill you need to have with them is just like be able to think about how the team works from end to end, right? Like, and just like understand, okay, here there's a system here that delivers software that goes from someone having an idea to then some software is deployed in production. There are like many steps on that, and to be able to see, okay, where is the bottleneck, right? Like what's stopping us from moving forward, and then how can I act on that bottleneck? And so that's like probably the main skill, I think. Like, and I think my kind of like hot take on the industry in general, I think something that I discuss a lot with managers that I work with is, I think because of for valid reasons, because I think like was really, companies grew really fast in technology in the past, like, 2 decades. I think like the profession of a software engineer became really valued. So like there was this kind of real focus on like the people, right? So it's kind of like a lot of like management became like, how do I help the engineer grow, and how do I make sure that like the team feels included, and like, and all these things are important, of course. Like I'm not saying that they're not, like they are definitely are, but like what I see in practice is that a lot of that kind of like individual improvement happens in teams that run well, right? Like, so I think, so the way I kind of like describe to people is just like, what to engineers that I manage is like, my contribution to your career is like making sure that you're part of a successful team. And because like then like that means people in the team are going to get rewarded. That means that people in the team are going to see success. They're going to understand how successful teams work. They're going to learn from that, and that makes the whole management part much easier, right? Because you now it's a virtuous cycle, right? You run a good team, you get more responsibility, people are rewarded, everyone's growing, and that's like great. The anti-pattern that I see, I think, too often is that if you focus too much on like managing each individual, like you say, okay, well, what does this person want to do, and what does that person want to do, and like how do I grow this career, like how do I give them opportunity, and you end up having like, you might end up having like teams that don't deliver well, if of course if you under optimize, and then that becomes worse for those people working the team, right? Because like then you get pressure for like, your team is not doing well, you're getting pressure from like your boss saying like, okay, what's happening? And then you got more constraints because people start saying, well, we need to be on top of this team to make sure they're working well. And then now you kind of like, you have less room to move. So it becomes like this vicious cycle, like this negative cycle that like, by trying to cater too much for like, by not catering enough on how the team works and how the process works, you end up creating a negative experience for everyone, including yourself, right? Because you're kind of like almost like running uphill. So, and it's just like, and there is this interesting dichotomy that a lot of like, that I see managers saying like, well, I want more freedom to kind of like, do the things that I want in the team. And the practical reality is that if your team does well, you're going to get a lot of freedom, because the fact is that most people in your company don't want to be inspecting what you're doing. Like you're probably the person you're reporting to, your manager, like they have other problems to solve, right? So the more you can like avoid your team being the problem, the more freedom you're gonna get. And that's gonna be like the way to achieve that, right? So
Yep.
So that's like kind of like how. So it's a long way to say that like I think the most important skill is to make sure that a team runs well and how to, from beginning to end, I think how to act on that. I think that if you do that well, being an engineering manager becomes much easier than otherwise.
Lots of focus in the system, not to mean that focusing on people is not important, but once you focus in the system and making sure the team runs well, people will get rewarded, people will grow, right? And I love what you said about if the team does well, there's also a lot of freedom. In another episode, we were saying, the guest was saying discipline equals freedom, right?
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that. The question I have is, so we talk about the system, right? And you talked about someone that can understand that there's an input, there's a process, there's an output, there's an organization, there are communication channels, all of that is going on. And if you don't focus on that, things are not going to run well. Is there a preferred way of doing that?
Yeah, that's like
methodology?
That's an interesting question, because I was gonna say something about that. Like, so I think one thing to talk about, and I'll answer your question, and maybe I'll do a introduction, then I'll answer your question. But like, and people think about, if you talk about system, a lot of times people think about a restrictive system, right? Like I think like, and that's like where I think, so like, the reaction that nowadays, if you talk about, for example, Scrum to someone, or like pick your favorite methodology, right? Like you got a reaction of like people just like, nobody wants to hear about it. Like they just say, oh, this constrains people, and like it's too strict and too rigid. And it's probably true, right? Like it is, because creating a system doesn't mean creating a place that's rigid, that everyone needs to do the same thing, and that's a machine, right? Like creating an optimal system is creating an optimal system where the individuals in that system can work to their full potential, right? So it can mean that you treat individuals differently because they have different skills, right? You can say, well, there's person A that likes to work by themselves more, so great. So maybe we can adapt the team to do that because we know they shine in that position. There's person B that is really good at testing, so like maybe there's like ways to kind of like understanding the individuals like of your team, like helps you create a system that is hopefully makes everyone deliver their full potential, and then makes the team deliver full potential, but like within the kind of like the boundary of like we are trying as a group to achieve something, right? So that means, which then goes to answer your question. I think like I don't have a methodology that I follow. I think like the maxim that I follow in some sense is like, I have a friend who his quote is just like, what the last 20 years of software development have taught us is that the things that matter are short feedback loops, automated testing, and high quality software. So like it's just saying like we want, like what I'm trying to do is just, okay, get feedback as soon as possible, and that means like, in the code, in the build, in the product. Like I think building a system that you can do that as much as quickly as possible and build with quality, right? So you say, okay, we wanna not, of course there's trade-offs that you can make in different places, but like with the focus on like building quality products so that you can actually keep you're not interrupted by problems, by issues, and you gain kind of like efficiency by being high quality. So that's like the methodology, right? If I think about like from a very high level, like building high quality systems, getting feedback as fast as possible. And how you do that in practice, I think that depends a lot on your company, your environment, your team, what you're doing. But that's like the North Star for me. And I think like, and the role is adapting to that. So of course you can get inspiration from any methodology that's out there in terms of like, like we at Braze here, like we run a version of Scrum. Like most teams run a version of Scrum, but it's like no one's looking at the book to say like this is what the Scrum, like managers are just like acting on it and say, okay, well, we're going to change this, we're trying to change that because that's how my team operates better. And we don't expect every team to work in the same way, right? We have some high level constraints of like, we all work within quarters, we all work with some kind of sprint definition, but that's basically it. Like then what you do with your team is how the team works is like up to the team and up to the manager. What the importance that they deliver the results that we talked about before, right? Just like team's productive, people are like fulfilled, and that's kind of the goal that they need to achieve.
Very nice. Do you hire engineering managers as well? Do you lead other engineering managers or coach them or grow them?
Yeah. So most people that I manage now are engineering managers or like directors. So like that's kind of like, and then some engineers, some like individual contributors, but mostly like managers nowadays. Yeah.
How do you interview or select them? How do you choose one over the other?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think it depends. I mean, there's a few things that we kind of there's a few principles that we follow, I think, and then I follow, I guess, as well. Like we expect engineering managers to be technical, so we're talking about people that have been engineers or are engineers and are moving. So like we don't particularly expect engineering managers to code, or like there's teams that they code, teams they don't, but mostly what we expect is that they understand the craft and they can guide teams into like architecture decisions, high level decisions. So like we have technical interviews. So that's one part of it, like that we do with managers as well. And we expect them to do as well as an engineer in them. Like so then apart from that, the thing is a lot of like leadership principles, which I think for me is just it's a lot of what we kind of like talked before, right? Is understanding like how do they think about managing teams, how do they think about problems, like kind of like I usually think about like how we talk about process, how they think about process, how they applied in the past, how they have solved problems like that happen like in teams in the past, and we talk about people, like how they have dealt with managing people and like how their principles around it. And so that's kind of like roughly how we think about leadership hiring. And then of course like then what we're looking is what I'm looking for is like what I kind of pretty much what I described, which is like people that can create a productive system within the team, right? And in a way that both is productive for the team, but also like is productive for the individuals within them.
Thank you. What do you think going to shift to the kind of the bigger picture now on the industry, the tech industry and the software developer? What challenges do you think exist in the industry, if any, or where do you think the industry is right now?
I mean, it's a great timing to ask that question. So maybe the simple answer is like I don't know. I think another thing anybody knows at this point. I think like the high level answer for that is I think it's an exciting time. Like the industry is changing. I think with AI and kind of like this whole like kind of like boom of like artificial intelligence, I think things are going to change to some level, right? So I think there will definitely be productivity improvements to some extent. I don't know now, are they going to be 2 times, 10 times, 100 times, or 1,000 times? Like that's like the question that nobody knows, I think. And I think a lot depends on that, right? So I think the interesting part for engineers is, it's like the main problems to exist for like what engineers what they are doing mostly, and I think are valued for, is just like being able to own and resolve problems, right? Like it's kind of like how do you deliver a solution for a problem that a customer has or someone has, right? So that's going to continue to exist, right? That's not gonna go away anytime soon. And we've been through, I mean, I'm not gonna say this is what happened in the past, because I don't know, but like I think we've been through like similar movements in productivity, right? Like, there's like if you think about if I look at what was 20 years ago, like what the challenges that we're trying to solve in software, they're basic things today. Like it's just we spend days or weeks of work to get a server online, like, and that's just you don't need that today anymore. Like, so, but the problem itself of like we're still getting a server online to do something, right? And understanding what that something is, be able to frame that, being able to build something that solves that and get feedback and kind of improve and iterate on it, like that's still a skill that's like the same, practice is the same.
Yeah. There's a joke going around. I talk a lot to developers and I work with developers, and they say, hey, AI is coming hard at us, but no matter how much AI you throw at software development, clients are still going to have a hard time understanding what they want and communicating what they want, so we're all safe.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know. Like maybe that's gonna be true. I think it will most likely will be true, but we'll see what the next years bring.
We'll see. Are you excited, worried, both when you think about new technologies?
I'm mostly excited. I think like what was gonna say, kind of lost a train of thought here, but it's an exciting time. I think like it's an exciting time as it was like, if I look back, like was something that was like part of like this whole rise of like iterative development, iterative software, and automated testing and continuous delivery, and like all of that, which were a practice that change how we work, right? Like if I just like I look back, I think my first job, I actually had a trainee job before I started my company. So like when I was like really, and I was building software for some handheld lap computers, which were pretty big at the time. And if I remember what that was like, so hard. Like we wrote code, like there was no tests. We just like every time we try to use it, we'll be like sweating because it's like, well, maybe this is gonna work, maybe it's not. Like, and it was just so hard to do that. Like, fast forward 20 years, like the things we do with software now are just like incredible, right? Like it's just like the fact that a single person can build like a high scale system used like worldwide, and like that's so like we have evolved a lot. Like what's going to happen, I think, in the next 20 years, I think that's maybe it's going to be a similar jump, maybe it's going to be more than that, but I think there's still a lot of problems to be solved, right? I think like so far what has happened in the industry is as software engineers became more proficient and more productive, we started solving more problems, right? There's not like there's still a lot of problems
problems are never going to stop. There are always problems you can look at, and then you just change the problem.
I mean, it's still like I was joking with someone, but sometimes you go to some website and you're just like, who built this? Like there's clearly like you could put more like effort into like, it's like they still don't work, like the basic things don't work. So yeah, maybe like, in 20 years, we're all going to be building AI systems for like, the barber shop next door, and just like they're going to have their own LLM, and they'll be like, we'll figure out. So maybe just the level of abstraction and the level of like needs going to increase, right? And that's kind of that. I think that's most likely what's going to like. I think what should happen. I think so. So I think it's exciting. I think we're just going to be hopefully spending less time doing meaningless work and more time like solving interesting problems.
Yeah, I love how you think about it. Francisco, what is your advice for younger generations making their inroads into software development?
Yeah, so I think it's a bit of what I just had before, what we just been talking about, right? The thing like is focus on like understanding there's a like technology is a tool to achieve something, right? And it's not a technology is not like a solution in itself. Like technology is it's a tool to solve a problem that someone has, right? And the problems they have existed for thousands of years, right? They're still the same, right? We're still, trying to communicate better with someone else. So we're trying to like organize ourselves. We're trying to be more productive. Like all these things are just like they're evergreen problems of like humanity. So I think the more you can, of course, like focus on technology and focus on like trying to like as much as possible learn and build, like learn how to build high quality systems. I think like that's like that's one of the aspects. And then the second part is just like understand understand how the system is working, right? Like in terms of like we talk about how this from idea to production, like how these things are being built and what are you like how is your job part of that, and what is the problem that you're trying to solve and how do you solve the problem better. And I think that the more you can like have that bigger picture and the more you can have like understand that, like I think the more successful people will be as like the technology underneath like changes, right? Because that's bound to happen. It's been happening for a while and it's going to continue to happen.
Excellent. Last question. What do you do when you are not working?
I mean, just I guess nothing too special. The basics. I read. I like to read quite a bit. So that's good. And I try to exercise. And I do boxing. That's my thing. And I don't know, just try to disconnect, I think, as much as possible. So I kind of like from having when I started my second company, I had this idea of like I wanted to work. Of course, I give it a good shot. So I said like I need to really be able to focus and work hard at this company because I'm putting like I was like quitting this great job to just like make no money again and just like try to like build something. So you kind of have to you force you to think about, well, how do I do this the best I can? And the kind of solution I found for myself was just always like I was happy to work like longer hours and stuff. I was like, the only thing that I need to do is like always exercise. Like I just need to like be able to like that's the thing I need to keep doing. I think that worked out quite well. I think it was kind of a way to just I don't know, it just resets my mood. And I
Yeah,
think that helps you like kind of like go through like work and life in general, like in a better way.
it's an amazing approach and so important and it's crazy. It's like eating healthy and practicing sports. Like we know we have to do it, but I've seen that the more that we get stressed, the more we go like, oh, screw it, I'm not going to exercise today, and I'm going to get a quarter pounder cheeseburger, right? Because I deserve it. And you don't deserve that. Actually, you deserve healthy food and exercising, but your brain works in a weird way, like so I love your
Yeah.
approach and how you go about it. Francisco, this has been amazing. I appreciate it. I had a lot of fun talking to you, and I hope we can do this sometime again in the future.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for the questions. Yeah, definitely always available for a good chat. So just let me know and we'll do it. But yeah, thanks so much for having me.